6. Tina Lerner. An audience is the best teacher. Between the many engagements that crowded upon the close of her long American tour, Miss Tina Lerner found time to talk over certain topics of significance which bear upon pianistic problems. We began by referring to the different methods of holding the hands, moving the fingers, and touching the keys, as exemplified by the various pianists now before the public. It is true that I play with the ball of the finger on the key, which necessitates a flat position of hand, with low wrist. Here the pianist illustrated the point by playing several pearly scales with straight, outstretched fingers. I never realized, however, that I played in this way until Mr. Ernest Hutchison, the pianist of Baltimore, recently called my attention to it. The fact is, I have always taken positions of body, arms, hands, and fingers, which seemed to me the most natural and easy. This I did when I began, at the age of 5, and I have always kept to them, in spite of what various teachers have endeavored to do for me. Fortunately, my early teachers were sensible and careful. They kept me at the classics and did not give too difficult pieces. The principles followed by most great pianists, I believe, are correct, but I have always kept to my own natural way. In hand position, therefore, I am individual. Perhaps no one else plays with such a finger position, so in this I am unique. For some reason unknown to me, it has come to be imagined that I have studied with Leschetizky. This is entirely refuted when I say I have never been in Vienna. It seems we are getting away from the idea of helping ourselves out with the name of some great teacher. The question should be, what has the player in himself? What can he accomplish? Not, whose pupil is he? We know of some of Leschetizky's famous pupils, but we never hear of the thousands he must have had, who have come to nothing. A teacher can only do a certain amount for you. He can give you new ideas, which each pupil works out for himself in his own way. The piano student learns from so many different sources. He attends a piano recital and acquires many ideas of touch, tone, phrasing, and interpretation. He hears a great singer or violinist and absorbs a wholly new set of thoughts, or he listens to a grand orchestra and gains more than from all the others. Then there is life to study from, experience, living, loving, all go into the work of the musician. A musical career is indeed the most exacting one that can be chosen. I have been asked whether I prefer to play for an audience of music lovers or one of music knowers. Perhaps an equal mixture is the happy medium. Of the two sorts, it seems to me the music knowers are preferable, for even if they are very critical, they also recognize the various points you make. They see and appreciate what you are striving for. They are not inclined to say, I don't like such or such a player, for the music knower understands the vast amount of time and energy, labor and talent that go to make a pianist. He rather says, I prefer the playing of such or such an artist. The word like, in connection with a great artist, seems almost an affront. What does it matter if his work is not liked by some? He knows it can stand for what it is, the utmost perfection of his powers, of himself. And after all, the audience is the greatest teacher an artist can have. I have learned more from this teacher than from any other. In this school, I learn what moves and touches an audience, how to improve this or that passage, how to make a greater climax here, or more sympathetic coloring there. For in conceiving how a work should sound, I get, in my study of it, a general idea of the whole, and make it as nearly perfect as I am able. But it has to be tested and tried. An audience must pass its opinion, must set the seal of approval upon it. When the work has been polished by repeated trials in the school, interpretation then becomes crystallized in the mind, and the piece can always be given in nearly the same way. A painter does not change nor repaint his picture each time he exhibits it. Why need the musician change his idea of the interpretation at each repetition? To trust too much to the inspiration of the moment might injure the performance as a whole. When I have my ideal of the interpretation worked out in mind, it becomes my sacred duty to play it always in the spirit, always to give my best. I can never think that because I am playing in Boston or New York, I must strive harder for perfection than if I play in a little town. No, I must give the highest that is in me, no matter where it may be. People sometimes ask me if I am nervous before a recital. It is not that I am afraid of people, but I am always anxious about being able to realize my ideal when the moment comes. I can say I prefer playing in America to anywhere else in the world, for there are more real appreciation and understanding here than in any other country. Of course, the great music centers all over the world are about the same, but the difference lies in the smaller cities, which in America are far more advanced musically than in Europe. I have proved this to be the case repeatedly. Not long ago, I was booked for a couple of recitals in a small town of not more than 2,000 inhabitants. When I arrived at the little place and saw the barn of a hotel, I wondered what these people could want with piano recitals. But when I came to the college where I was to play and found such a large, intelligent audience gathered, some of whom had traveled many miles to be present, it proved in what estimation music was held. The teacher of the school was a good musician who had studied 9 years with Leschetizky in Vienna. The pupils understood the numbers on the program, were wide awake, and well informed as to what was going on in the world of music. One handicap the present-day pianist encounters, who plays much with orchestra, and that is the dearth of modern concertos. The familiar 10 or dozen famous ones are played over, and one seldom hears anything new. There are new ones written, to be sure, but the public has not learned to care for them. The beautiful second concerto of Rachmaninoff has not made a success, even in the great music centers, where the most intelligent audiences have heard it. I believe that if an audience of the best musicians could be assembled in a small room and this work could be played to them, they could not fail to be impressed with its beauties. I am now studying a new concerto by Haddon Wood, which you see in manuscript there on the piano. It is one I find very beautiful. A subsequent conversation with the artist elicited the following. I might say that I began my music when about 4 years old, by playing the Russian national hymn on a toy piano containing 8 keys, which had been given me. My older sister, who was studying the piano, noticed this, showed me a few things about the notes, and I constantly picked out little tunes and pieces on the real piano. Finally, one day my sister's teacher, Rudolf Heim, came to the house, mainly on my account. This was in Odessa, in the south of Russia, where I was born and where I spent my early years. On this occasion, he wanted to look at me and see what I could do. Unluckily, a sudden fit of shyness overcame me and I began to cry. The exhibition could not take place, as nothing could be made out of me that day. You see, I was headstrong even at that early age, said the young pianist, with one of her charming smiles. Soon after this incident, I was taken to the professor's studio. He examined me, considered I had talent, and thought it should be cultivated. So he took me in hand. I was then 5, and my real musical education began at that time. From the very first, I adopted a position of hand which seemed to me most convenient and comfortable, and no amount of contrary instruction and advice has ever been able to make me change it. I play scales and passages with low hand and flat fingers because that position seems the most favorable for my hand. When practicing, I play everything very slowly, raising my fingers high and straight from the knuckle joint. This gives me great clearness and firmness. In rapid passage work, the action is reduced, but the position remains. I am said to have a clear, pearly touch with quite sufficient power at my command for large works. After 5 years of study with my first teacher, Rudolf Heim, a pupil of Moschel's, I entered the Moscow Conservatory and continued my studies under Professor Pabst, brother and teacher of the composer of that name. I was then 10 years old. Professor Pabst was very conservative, very strict, and kept me at work on the music of the older masters. This kind of music suits me, I think. At least I enjoy it. Even here I still clung to my ideas of holding my hands and of touching the keys, and always expect to do so. I remained with this professor about 6 years, and then began my public career. You ask about my present studies and how I regulate my practice. During my periods of rest from concert work, I practice a great deal. I wish I could say all the time, but that is not quite possible. I give an hour or more a day to technical practice. As to the material, I use Chopin's Etudes constantly, playing them with high-raised, outstretched fingers, in very slow tempo. One finds almost every technical problem illustrated in these Etudes: octaves, arpeggios, scales in double thirds and sixths, repeated notes, as in number 7, broken chords, and passage work. I keep all these etudes in daily practice, also using some of the Liszt Etudes Transcendence and, of course, Bach. The advantage of using this sort of material is that one never tires of it. It is always interesting and beautiful. With this material well in hand, I am always ready for recital and need only to add special pieces and modern music. In learning a new work, I first study it very slowly, trying to become familiar with its meaning. I form my concept of it and live with it for months before I care to bring it forward. I try to form an ideal conception of the piece, work this out in every detail, then always endeavor to render it as closely like the ideal as possible.